Welcome in, everyone. Today we're diving into something pretty heavy, actually. The connection between the child welfare system
Yeah.
and the criminal justice system.
Interesting combo.
Particularly how it all hits Black families hardest.
Yeah, and we're looking at this article from In These Times magazine.
Right.
It's called How the Child Welfare System is Silently Destroying Black Families.
And the article uses this really strong phrase,
Mm-hmm.
family policing,
Yeah.
to describe how this system especially targets these communities.
Right.
Have you ever thought about how investigating families for potential child maltreatment
Oh, yeah.
could actually be like police practices?
It's a disturbing thought, but let's look at Angeline Montalban.
Okay.
She called a domestic abuse hotline.
Right, looking for help.
Exactly, a vulnerable moment.
Yeah.
Instead of getting support,
Uh-oh.
it triggered a child welfare investigation.
Wow, so they show up at your door inspecting your home, your son, all because you reached out for help.
It really shows the core problem here.
Yeah.
This wasn't about abuse.
Right.
It was a system reacting with suspicion instead of support.
Wow.
And sadly, this happens a lot. Even with no proof of abuse,
Okay.
they took her son and put him in foster care.
Oh, no.
It took her 5 years to get him back.
5 years.
5 years.
That's a huge chunk of a kid's life.
Exactly. And this brings us to the bigger picture.
Okay.
The article says CPS investigates 3.5 million children a year.
Wow.
That means by 18, 1 in 3 kids will have been investigated by CPS.
Wow, and for Black children, it's even worse.
Yeah, way worse. 53% experience an investigation.
More than half.
More than half of Black children, just heartbreaking.
It's got to be systemic.
Definitely. We can't ignore how Black families are disproportionately caught up in this.
No, absolutely not.
This is where that criminal justice comparison really hits home.
Right.
It starts with the surveillance.
Okay.
Think about the power imbalance.
Yeah.
The article calls these investigations stop and frisk for families.
Makes sense.
Vague child neglect laws give investigators huge power. They can go through your home, question anyone, even strip search kids.
That's terrifying.
It is. It creates fear and suspicion.
Especially in communities already over-policed.
Exactly. And it goes beyond physical surveillance, too.
Right.
Now we have technology, AI monitoring families.
So algorithms are deciding families' fates.
Potentially based on biased data.
That's chilling. And the article says it goes further.
Absolutely. It compares how the system uses punishment,
Okay.
like the criminal justice system.
Right.
This is where family imprisonment comes in.
Oh, wow.
The rate of kids in foster care.
Yeah.
It's almost the same as the adult incarceration rate.
Really?
And for Black and Native American kids,
Mm-hmm.
they're twice as likely as white kids to lose both parents' rights.
So terminating parental rights, especially for those families,
Yeah.
it's basically family imprisonment.
It really is.
And then there's this whole other thing.
What's that?
Mandated reporters,
Oh, yeah.
teachers, healthcare workers, anyone legally required to report suspected child abuse or neglect.
Right. Creates constant surveillance.
Right. So imagine the pressure on families, especially those needing social services,
Yeah.
knowing any little slip-up could trigger an investigation.
It's a lot.
It really is.
It can make people avoid getting help.
Out of fear of a report.
Yeah, and losing their kids.
Exactly. And the article makes a really interesting point.
Yeah.
All the money spent investigating these claims,
Right.
many of which are unfounded,
Uh-huh.
could be better used to actually help these families.
Right. Imagine those resources going towards real support.
Exactly. What if the focus shifted from investigation and punishment?
To actually helping families thrive.
Totally. That's what the article is pushing for.
Absolutely.
And-
Moving away from family policing
Yeah.
towards actually empowering families.
So how do we do that? I mean,
Yeah.
the article makes some really strong connections between the systems.
Between child welfare and criminal justice.
Yeah. And how they both disproportionately hurt Black families.
It goes way beyond individual bias, though. It's this huge societal pattern.
Rooted in our history.
Exactly. We can't ignore slavery and segregation.
How they still affect things today.
And how poverty itself is criminalized.
Right, leading to all this over-surveillance and punishment.
Of low-income families, especially Black families,
It's like the system punishes people for their situation.
instead of helping them get out of it.
And the article argues that's totally counterproductive.
It tears families apart,
Right, instead of strengthening them.
creating these cycles of poverty and trauma,
They go on for generations. And think about the kids taken from their families.
stuck in a system that cares more about control than actual care.
Exactly. And it's not just the families themselves.
It affects entire communities.
Right, when you're afraid of the system,
You're less likely to ask for help,
even when you really need it.
which just makes the system even less effective.
Yeah, people might hesitate to report real abuse.
Because they're scared of what could happen.
It's this awful cycle. But the article does offer some hope.
Oh, good.
It calls us to action,
To do what?
to reimagine child welfare, to prioritize kids, but not through punishment and surveillance.
So what's the alternative?
Support and empowerment.
Okay, so what does that actually look like?
Right. What can we do to actually address the root causes of child maltreatment?
Instead of reacting after it's already happened.
The article doesn't have all the answers.
Yay.
But it points us in the right direction.
Towards a more holistic approach.
Yeah, one that sees the strengths in families
Instead of focusing on their weaknesses.
and invests in prevention
Giving families the resources they need.
to create safe environments for their kids.
Right. Things like affordable housing,
Quality childcare,
healthcare,
mental health services.
job training, all of that,
It's about giving everyone a real chance,
regardless of race.
income. But the article makes it clear the current system isn't working,
Especially for Black families.
and we can't ignore that.
It's a call for radical change.
A complete rethinking of child welfare.
And it starts with understanding the problem,
Having these difficult conversations
challenging our assumptions.
and demanding better for our kids and families.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Think about what this means for you.
this isn't just some abstract problem,
It's about how we treat families.
especially Black families.
It's about understanding the system
How it can keep people trapped in poverty and trauma.
and questioning the idea that the system always helps kids.
The reality is a lot more complicated.
There's bias, lack of resources.
Things that hurt families.
The article wants us to think differently,
To imagine a system that supports families,
that focuses on prevention and empowerment,
that recognizes their strengths.
and gives them the tools to thrive.
So keep this conversation going.
Yeah, pay attention to how people talk about child welfare and really think about what's being said.
Don't be afraid to question things.
Exactly. And try to see different sides of the story.
Think about what you can do in your own community to support families.
Yeah, because this is about all of us, right?
It really is. At the end of the day, kids need their families to be healthy.
To be able to thrive.
And we need a society where every family gets that chance.
Without fear of being punished or constantly watched.
That's the goal.
So that's our deep dive for today. Hopefully this got you thinking.
And maybe even inspired you to do something.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening, everyone.